This is the story of how a single deactivated security badge outside a heavily guarded intensive care wing permanently shattered a queen's illusion of absolute medical and institutional control. In less than 24 hours, the sterile, highly secure corridors of the Royal Medical Suite transformed from the launching pad of Queen Camilla's ultimate informational takeover into the physical staging ground of her most terrifying public isolation. What looked like a routine update to hospital visitation protocols was actually a bloodless, calculated execution of constitutional warfare. What Camilla just realized, standing in the suffocating silence of the hospital corridor as her private physicians were physically barred from entering the King's Suite, is that the crown on her head grants her zero executive authority against the unyielding medical governance of the royal bloodline. In this video, we are going to unpack the secret desperate medical power grab Camilla attempted under the cover of the King's ongoing health vulnerabilities. We will examine how she tried to weaponize the sovereign's medical household to grant herself sole proxy status, effectively attempting to become the exclusive gatekeeper to the monarch's health, cutting off the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal from direct medical intelligence. We will break down the exact forensic metadata trail that Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered within the Privy Council's medical advisory boards. By the end of this analysis, you will understand the silent, ruthless retaliation that left Camilla staring at a locked set of double doors, trapped by the terrifying realization that she actually controls absolutely nothing. To comprehend why this institutional trap snaps shut so brutally, one must first dismantle the towering illusion of absolute supremacy Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously constructing. For 30 years, her entire trajectory was defined by a highly sophisticated public relations campaign designed to outlast public outrage, sanitize her history and systematically centralize all royal authority around her own image. She operated under the firm, unwavering belief that because she held complete psychological dominance over King Charles, she inherently held the master keys to the entire constitutional and physical apparatus of the monarchy, including his own physical autonomy. Her inner circle and elite network of media strategists and aristocratic allies had grown to believe they were entirely untouchable, assuming the transition of the reign granted them a blank check to reshape the royal operational boundaries in their own image. That sense of invincibility manifested in increasingly bold informational choices that palace watchers noticed with deep discomfort. Over the past few months of the King's health crisis, Camilla had gradually begun treating the royal medical bulletins not as matters of state transparency, but as her personal public relations portfolio. She subtly attempted to frame herself as the indispensable co-monarch, the sole pillar of strength holding the institution together, while simultaneously pushing the direct bloodline heirs to the periphery of the narrative. Camilla believed she had rewritten the rules of engagement, convincing herself that her 30-year survival game had achieved absolute permanent victory over the inner workings of the palace. She felt completely secure in her elevated position, misinterpreting the King's personal vulnerability for her own unyielding executive jurisdiction, completely failing to notice the silent seismic shift in constitutional power happening right beneath her feet. But arrogance in the corridors of power inevitably leads to catastrophic carelessness. The trigger for the current collapse occurred as the palace began finalizing the highly classified, long-term medical contingencies required for the ongoing treatment of the sovereign. Recognizing the inherent fragility of her position as a consort and facing the stark reality of the King's unpredictable health trajectory, Camilla was gripped by a sophisticated form of institutional and social desperation. She understood that her current supremacy, her ability to command the global press, and her leverage over the palace machinery are tied entirely to her proximity to the King's ear. She knows that if Prince William and Princess Anne control the medical narrative, her leverage drops to absolute zero. Driven by this panic, Camilla attempted a breathtaking secret administrative maneuver designed to secure a permanent, impenetrable informational fortress for herself before the window of opportunity slammed shut. Behind closed doors, she quietly directed her private office to submit a revised, highly confidential memorandum to the medical household and the overarching Privy Council. The paperwork contained an extraordinary set of demands. Camilla was attempting to formally dismiss the King's traditional state-appointed senior physicians individuals who possess an ultimate loyalty to the Crown as an institution and replace them with her own network of private, highly paid doctors sourced from her exclusive social circles. Furthermore, the documents contained a legally binding medical proxy directive that would name Camilla as the sole, ultimate decision maker regarding the king's treatments and crucially the release of his medical data. This was not a simple request for a wife to be involved in her husband's care. It was a calculated attempt to use the sovereign's illness to execute a hostile takeover of state intelligence. She was attempting to embed her private shadow court into the permanent medical architecture of the British state, ensuring she could dictate exactly what the government, the public, and even the Prince of Wales knew about the monarch's true condition. Camilla fundamentally believed that if the paperwork slipped through the chaotic fog of the king's treatment schedule, her future as the ultimate palace gatekeeper was entirely untouchable. What Camilla fundamentally failed to anticipate was that the administrative machinery she sought to manipulate was already being forensically monitored by the ultimate protectors of the crown. While she was busy executing her strategy through the medical logistical offices, Princess Anne and Prince William were quietly protecting the perimeter. Princess Anne operates with a fierce, almost terrifying devotion to the constitutional integrity of the monarchy. As a senior member of the Privy Council, Anne understands that the health of the sovereign is not a private domestic matter to be managed by a spouse's public relations team. It is a matter of profound national security and constitutional continuity. William, a man who has carried the silent, enduring grief of his mother's tragic vulnerabilities, and who possesses an unwavering instinct to protect the future of the crown, saw the paper trail for exactly what it was. He recognized the staggering exploitation hidden within the medical jargon. He saw the precise, calculated attempt to permanently isolate his father and aggressively elevate the Parker Bowles narrative by hijacking the medical bulletins. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has faced her own health battles with uncomplaining grace, transparency, and a profound respect for institutional boundaries. Never once attempting to weaponize her medical team against the overarching hierarchy, William has watched this contrast, and he has remembered everything. When the unauthorized proxy memorandum was routed through the overarching medical committees, it immediately triggered a highly classified administrative alert that landed directly on the desks of Princess Anne and the Prince of Wales. Together, they conducted a silent forensic audit of the submission logs. They uncovered the extensive metadata trail of Camilla's private office, attempting to bypass standard constitutional vetting and pressure the senior medical staff under the guise of the king's immediate comfort. The moral outrage within the bloodline was absolute, but in the upper echelons of the House of Windsor. You do not react with emotional screaming matches in hospital waiting rooms, nor do you leak tabloid stories about family infighting. You react with weaponized restraint. The retaliation was executed with chilling bureaucratic precision, turning the very rules of hospital security and Privy Council protocol into a clinical guillotine. William did not confront his stepmother at the king's bedside, nor did he spark a public scandal that would cause his father undue distress. Instead, working alongside Princess Anne's structural authority, he activated his absolute power over the royal estate's operational and security frameworks. A new internal directive backed by the unyielding weight of the Privy Council was quietly issued to the Metropolitan Police Protection Command and the chief administrators of the Royal Medical Facility. The execution of their revenge culminated on the precise morning Camilla had scheduled her new private medical team to take over the King's intensive care suite, believing her secret directives had been successfully processed. Camilla arrived at the VIP wing flanked by her elite network of private physicians, fully expecting the heavy security doors to swing open, granting her absolute unchecked dominance over the medical floor. But as the loud physician stepped up to the security checkpoint and scanned his newly issued VIP lanyard, the trap snapped shut with breathtaking speed. The digital clearance codes had been cleanly and permanently wiped from the hospital's mainframe. The scanner flashed a brilliant, unforgivable red. The specialized Royal Protection Officers acting under the strict, newly updated constitutional directives from the Office of the Prince of Wales stepped forward and formed a physical blockade. They politely but firmly informed Camilla's private medical team that their credentials had been administratively voided by the Privy Council, and they were entirely unauthorized to view the sovereign's medical charts or enter the secure perimeter. There was no screaming, no flashing cameras, and no dramatic scene. There was only the devastating reality of a locked door and a deactivated access fob. The private doctors were ordered to leave the hospital premises immediately, but the strike went deeper. When Camilla attempted to bypass the guards and enter the suite herself, the head of the sovereign's traditional medical household approached her with a newly printed state-sanctioned protocol document. She was informed that under the new constitutional directives, her status had been formally categorized. She was no longer the supreme medical proxy. Her access to the operational medical meetings was permanently revoked. She was instructed that moving forward, she would only be permitted entry to the king's room during standard, routine next of kin visiting hours, and she would be required to use a secondary side door stripped of her executive entourage. She was being visually, administratively, and physically contained. Camilla stood frozen in the sterile corridor, staring at the physical proof of her absolute isolation. Her grand informational empire had been dismantled before a single new medical bulletin could be drafted. As the panic of total institutional containment set in, she reached into her bag for her encrypted telephone to demand the king intervene from his hospital bed, entirely unaware that the silence waiting for her would change the reading of absolutely everything. The heavy, encrypted telephone receiver felt like lead in her trembling hand as the secure line connected from the isolated, sterile hospital corridor to the king's private intensive care suite. In the echoing, suffocating silence of the medical wing, Camilla presented her grievances with the breathless, practiced urgency of a woman whose entire informational fortress was suddenly in free fall. She laid out the humiliating border rejection at the security checkpoint, the deactivated access badges, the private doctors forced out of the building, and the devastating administrative blockade orchestrated by Prince William and the Privy Council. She demanded an immediate sovereign intervention. She fully expected King Charles to summon the chief medical officers, overrule the Prince of Wales, and reinstate the supreme medical proxy she'd so carefully mapped out for herself. For 3 decades, this exact dynamic had been her ultimate safety net. Charles had fractured his relationship with the British public, fundamentally altered the trajectory of the monarchy, and absorbed immense global criticism, all to ensure she would one day wield the absolute executive power of a queen. But that is where the narrative shifts completely, not because of a grand, dramatic argument across the secure line, but because of a devastating, unyielding silence. King Charles did not summon his aides to issue a royal countermand. He did not order the protection officers to unlock the double doors and allow her private PR physicians inside. Instead, he met his wife's frantic demands with a heavy, agonizing exhaustion that carried the absolute weight of the monarchy's physical and constitutional future. The king's silence was not a sign of a husband's indifference. It was the profound, calculated concession of a reigning monarch who had just been forced to face the harsh reality of his own shifting reign, his own severe vulnerabilities, and the undeniable limits of his power. Charles understands what Camilla refuses to accept. The survival of the House of Windsor no longer depends on the public relations ambitions of the present, but on the unshakable, legally binding constitutional stability of the future, a future entirely managed by Prince William. By refusing to intervene, the king quietly validated the administrative guillotine that William and Princess Anne had dropped. He signaled to the entire palace apparatus and to the government officers monitoring the sovereign's health that the true governing authority over the institution's continuity had already transitioned to the Prince of Wales. Intervening to protect Camilla's private informational network now would mean declaring a public institutional war against his own heir and the Privy Council, risking a catastrophic constitutional crisis. In that agonizingly quiet conversation, Charles chose the monarchy over her. He chose the survival of the bloodline. And in doing so, he left Camilla standing in a hospital corridor, facing the terrifying realization that her ultimate shield had just dissolved. This devastating silence exposes the raw, fragile underbelly of what can only be described as Camilla's profound institutional desperation. To the outside world, she smiles bravely for the cameras outside the hospital gates, creating the glittering illusion of a matriarch firmly in control of the monarchy's darkest hours. But the cold constitutional reality of the British state is that she actually controls nothing. She holds no independent royal authority, and she possesses no inherent jurisdiction over the medical household of the sovereign. A medical proxy for a reigning monarch is not merely a piece of domestic paperwork, it is the ultimate state-sanctioned weapon. It is an administrative blank check that guarantees total control over the global narrative. the ability to dictate the flow of intelligence to the government, and the power to hold the entire institution hostage. Camilla knew that the moment King Charles is no longer capable of executing his duties, her institutional currency drops to absolute zero. She becomes entirely dependent on the grace and favour of King William V. Her push to embed her private doctors into the permanent medical architecture of the state was born out of a suffocating awareness that her time at the top is strictly finite, and that without a legally binding proxy, she could be shut out of the room with a single keystroke. William's decision to execute a forensic audit and permanently void that proxy was a masterclass in institutional containment. He weaponized the constitutional laws of the state to lay bare her vulnerability, revealing that without the explicit approval of the Prince of Wales and the Privy Council, her personal empire is completely insolvent and informationally exposed. He proved that the sovereign's health cannot be carved up and distributed as public relations fodder to a shadow court. The deeper meaning behind this silent execution of revenge became highly visible in the days that followed. The deactivated security badge was not just a logistical failure for Camilla's team, it was the ultimate visual representation of an institutional quarantine. The subtle details of this shifting power are now visible to anyone who understands the silent language of the British monarchy. The very next morning, the official Royal Medical Bulletin was released to the global press. It bore the unmistakable restrained hallmarks of Prince William's operational oversight. Camilla's name, which she had so desperately tried to weave into the centre of previous health updates, was conspicuously absent. The update was clinically stamped by the traditional medical household, confirming that the era of her behind-the-scenes manipulation was officially over. This is where the story shifts from the cold execution of containment to the undeniable restoration of the true order. As Camilla's borrowed executive power evaporated, Catherine the Princess of Wales retained her rightful place with an effortless, quiet dominance. The contrast between the two women could not have been more stark, and the institution knows exactly who holds the true power. Catherine has never needed to submit unauthorized memorandums to the Privy Council to secure her relevance during a crisis. Catherine herself navigates the terrifying complexities of public health battles, not through manipulation or PR shell games, but because her power is rooted in uncomplaining sacrifice, flawless execution of duty, and absolute transparency. When Catherine addresses the public regarding matters of health, her influence is authentic, earned through years of silent endurance and absolute loyalty to the crown. She does not need private doctors to act as media conduits. Her quiet dignity speaks louder than any manufactured press release. By ensuring that the medical integrity of the monarchy remains untainted by Camilla's private overreach, William was doing more than protecting the Privy Council's intelligence flow. He was offering a silent, devastating defense of his mother's legacy. For years, William watched how the palace machinery was weaponized to isolate Princess Diana, manipulating the narrative surrounding her mental and physical well-being to protect the very architect of her sorrow. By fiercely guarding the sovereign's medical protocols, William guaranteed that the institution's health apparatus will never again be hijacked by a shadow court. He ensured that the truth belongs to the crown, not to Camilla's public relations operatives. It was not an act of petty vindictiveness. It was the ultimate silent restoration of order, executed through the undeniable permanence of constitutional protocol. The boundaries have been firmly re-established, sending a clear signal to the world that the ancient organism of the British monarchy cannot be permanently hollowed out by clever media strategists, nor can its most sensitive state intelligence be hijacked through emotional manipulation. The crown protects its assets, its history, its data, and its bloodline at all costs. Camilla believed that by outlasting her critics and securing the title of Queen, she had achieved absolute permanent victory. She thought she had conquered the institution and secured the master keys to its ultimate sanctuaries. But she failed to recognize that true royal authority cannot be taken by storm or secured through administrative tricks. It requires the deep foundational legitimacy of sovereign duty. As she stood in the quiet sterility of the hospital corridor, looking at the heavy security doors that contained her dismantled future, the grand illusion vanished completely. She may still ride in the state carriages for now, but everyone inside the palace walls, and soon everyone in the world, knows the truth. The trap has snapped shut. The informational borders of the estate have been permanently redrawn. The reign of the medical shadow court has been entirely dismantled, leaving behind only the cold reality of a consort who is merely a temporary guest in a house she sought to rule. and the undeniable truth that the era of Prince William has already begun. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics and constitutional battles of the British monarchy. If you found this forensic analysis compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below with your thoughts on Prince William and Princess Anne's decisive administrative retaliation. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the unspoken truths behind the palace walls.